For TA leaders, the current market isn't just disruption, it's exhaustion. Between AI transformation, budget cuts, and talent shortages, burnout is a real possibility. So, what can you do to build a sustainable career that creates a lasting impact rather than burning out in all of the chaos? Keep listening to find out. Support for this podcast comes from Smart Recruiters. Are you looking to supercharge your hiring? Meet Winston, Smart Recruiters' AI-powered companion. I've had a demo of Winston. The capabilities are extremely powerful, and it's been crafted to elevate hiring to a whole new level. This AI sidekick goes beyond the usual assistant, handling all the time-consuming admin work so you can focus on connecting with top talent and making better hiring decisions. From screening candidates to scheduling interviews, Winston manages it all with AI precision, keeping the hiring process fast, smart, and effective. Head over to smartrecruiters.com and see how Winston can deliver superhuman results.
There's been more of scientific discovery, more of technical advancement and material progress in your lifetime and mine than in all the ages of history.
Hi there, welcome to episode 726 of Recruiting Future with me, Matt Alder. Recruiting Future helps talent acquisition leaders drive measurable impact by developing their strategic capability in foresight, influence, talent, and technology. If you're interested in finding out how your TA function measures up in these 4 critical areas, I've created the free Fit for the Future assessment. It'll give you personalized insights to help you build strategic clarity and drive greater impact immediately. Just head over to mattalder.me/podcast to complete the assessment. It takes less than 5 minutes. This episode is about foresight and talent. The modern workplace has created an epidemic of burnout that's quietly destroying careers and companies alike. Many professionals are quietly battling anxiety, sleep disruption, and physical exhaustion while maintaining a facade of having everything under control. TA leaders are currently navigating AI adoption, defending budgets, managing anxious teams, and are still expected to fill critical roles faster than ever. So, what kind of systems can you put in place to prioritise your own well-being while still making a lasting impact in the business? My guest this week is Chris Ducker, a serial entrepreneur and best-selling author. Chris suffered a severe burnout back in 2021 and has used the lessons it taught him to develop a life operating system that sits at the centre of his new book, The Long Haul Leader. I've known Chris for a while now, and the advice and insights he offers are very much grounded in the reality of modern working life. Hi, Chris, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Matt.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Could you quickly introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do?
Yeah, sure. So Chris Ducker. After 22 years of starting and building businesses, I now focus on investing, advising, and coaching business owners to help them be able to scale with balance, not burnout. That's my whole thing.
Fantastic. And that's exactly what I kind of want to dig into. So I'm particularly excited to have you on the show because we've been working together for the last 18 months. So I've been part of your fantastic mastermind with a brilliant group of people and been working with you as my coach. And through that time, you've got a new book coming out in a few weeks' time. And really, I've sort of seen the latter stages of that book production and that journey. And I think there's just so much that, my audience can learn from your book and the way that you work. I was just really keen to have this conversation. So let's start by talking about the book. What's the book? Why have you written it? And what can people get out of it?
Yeah, so it's called The Long Haul Leader, and it's a collection of strategies put together into a 4-step framework that allows people to ultimately go the distance in work and life, right? So you hear a lot about work-life balance, and I don't believe in that. I think it's a bit of a myth, quite frankly. I think, the days of 9 to 5 and sort of going home and not having to worry about, work and everything is sort of very much over. We've got folks like BlackBerry and Apple to thank for that. Times have changed a lot, right? And so, it's not about work-life balance. It's about priorities. It's about putting yourself, at the center of everything that you do. And, understanding ultimately that self-care is not selfish. It is actually quite strategic. If you want to go the long haul, if you want to be around for a good while doing what you're doing, whether you're a business owner or a C-suite executive, or CEO, CFO, CMO, head of any department in any large business, you should be looking at, what it really means to become a long haul leader. And more importantly, what that means for the folks that you lead and that you surround yourself with day to day.
Absolutely. And I want to dive into the operating system and a lot of the detail around this in a second. Before we do, though, give us a bit more of your sort of personal backstory about why you felt the need to write this book.
Well, so I've hit burnout twice in my career. So I've been building businesses for 22 years, almost 23 years. 3 very successful businesses, 2 of which have been acquired, the third one of which we still run. And in 2010, I hit that first burnout, but it was more physical than anything else. I was able to kind of get back to it, so to speak, pretty quickly after taking some time off and kind of just recalibrating, recharging my batteries a little bit. But in 2021, I hit burnout again. And this one was a little different. This one hit both from a physical standpoint and from a mental standpoint as well, and probably a certain amount of emotional standpoint. At the time, I kept it all in. I didn't talk to anybody about it, not even my wife initially. She eventually figured it all out and sort of took me to task and sat me down. But ultimately, I was diagnosed with anxiety, depression, and phase 3 adrenal fatigue, which in layman's terms, it's about as close as you can get to a clinical burnout diagnosis as possible. If you go to here in the UK, maybe different in the US, but in the UK, if you go to your GP and they tell you that you've got, phase 3 adrenal fatigue, they don't really have a plan for that. They don't really kind of look at that and say, oh, you're burnt out. But ultimately, your adrenal glands, which sit on the top of your kidneys, they produce cortisol, which is your stress hormone. And if you produce too much of it for too long, your adrenals just put their hands up fundamentally and say, nope, I'm done. I'm not helping you out anymore. You can deal with all of this on your own now. And that's basically where I was. I'm not there anymore now, right? Fast forward 4 years later in a much, much better place. But it was a pretty big wake-up call. And through the combination of recovering from that burnout, and by the way, I should say, in 2021, we had an amazing business year. Multi 7 figures. I was ultimately enjoying the work I was doing, but I was doing too much of it. I wasn't looking after myself properly. Simple as that. But yeah, you fast forward now, in a much, much better spot. But generally, I didn't see it coming. And as part of recovering from all of that, I did a lot of deep research. I spoke with a lot of great people, a lot of experts, a lot of doctors and functional medicine people and all that kind of stuff. And I started kind of making all these notes. And before I knew what was happening, they were kind of going into 4 pretty major buckets. And those 4 buckets became the Life OS, or the, the Life operating system inside of the book. So yeah, the book came about from nothing but my own horrible hardships, quite frankly.
Yeah, and I think lots of people who are listening could probably really empathize with that, actually, because I think burnout is just sort of widespread, I think, and people don't even know that they've got it or it's happening to them. I think that it's a particularly kind of sort of stressful year for businesses. It's particularly disruptive in my sector at the moment. And this kind of all feeds into this for people. So let's just talk about burnout a little bit, just in terms of how do people know that they've got it and what are the most important things to do to make sure that you don't get to that stage?
Well, the thing is, it's different for everybody. And this is why it's so tricky to kind of quote unquote diagnose, right? Some people are burnt out because they've had a specific period of what I would call a season of hustle, right? And where basically they've just put their foot down on the gas for too long. Let it be 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, maybe a year. They've had a big project that they've been kind of trying to land and finish. Maybe there's a flood of deadlines have sort of hit one after another over the course of, a short space of time. And they're burnt out at the end of it. They're tired. They're kind of exhausted. Then, you as a God, I need a holiday kind of thing, But that kind of burnout is relatively, temporary, and it can almost always be overcome by having a really good holiday, like really resetting, recharging your batteries. But then there's deeper burnout, right? For some people, it is, and I didn't see the anxiety and the depression thing coming my way at all. I've always been a very kind of get up and go kind of guy, like super proactive, relatively type A, extroverted individual, and so if you'd have asked me, 7-8 years ago, do you think you're going to ever be on antidepressants, Chris? I would have called you a madman, but I was for 18 months, right? So, I think that it's different for everyone. However, there are warning signs, and these warning signs are generally felt by most people that are going through it. And we did a lot of research on this subject because I wanted to get it right for the book, obviously, and not just sort of talk from personal experience only. And I was pretty amazed to see 68% of C-suite leaders in the United States, and this was from a Forbes survey that was done. 68% of C-suite leaders claim to have felt burnt out in the last 12 months. And actually, for entrepreneurs, people who are running their own businesses, that goes up to 78%. So it just goes to show you how tired we all are of being hyper-connected all the time, in not having the right time off, in not taking care of ourselves properly, too much pressure at work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So the big warning signs, there's 3 of them. First and foremost is your sleep is disrupted. Now, some people say, well, I don't particularly sleep very well anyway. I've always been like that. That's fine. Like, some people only need 6 hours sleep. Others need 8 or 9 hours sleep, right? But if, let's say, for example, you're a 6-hour kind of person and you're having problems getting those 6 hours every single night, just as much as you would do if you were a 7 or an 8-hour person, then that sleep issue is going to cause you to get more and more tired, more and more stressed, more and more agitated, more and more anxious, et cetera, right? So the first one is sleep. So, looking after our sleep habits is really, really, really important. I was awful with this, and I'm pretty sure this is a big major contributor, particularly as that burnout came in 2021 when we were in the middle of the pandemic. There wasn't much going on. I was probably drinking a little bit too many cocktails during the week. I was, no doubt, watching too many movies late at night and not getting enough sleep, and so on and so on. So that's the first thing. Second thing is diet. 2 big things that we researched that we found out about diet. First and foremost, the dependency on caffeine is huge for people that are in burnout. And the reason why it becomes a true dependency is because what caffeine does is it acts as that stimulant. It puts a massive amount of pressure on your adrenals to create more cortisol. But the problem is, if you've already got depleted adrenals and your cortisol levels already low, ultimately what the caffeine is doing is strangling your adrenals into submission. So it makes the problem even worse. So it's kind of one of those horrible life cycles, right? And then the third one, the really important one, was dependency on sugar. So this obviously has like more issues connected to it than just getting quick sugar fixes through the day for energy. But, rates of obesity and rates of, everything from, heart palpitations right the way up to you name it, right? So there was a lot that goes into it, but ultimately you're probably burnt out if you're feeling, honestly, that like you need a really nice long vacation. That's the short and the end of it. It really is that simple.
6 months or something like that, yeah. And I think the crux of there is what you were saying earlier, that with things like smartphones, with the way that work works, it's very easy just to be working all of the time. And we don't have a kind of a model, we're still working on a very, very kind of outdated 9 to 5 way of thinking about work. So there isn't that sort of switch off time if that just kind of floods into the evening and the weekends and things like that. You mentioned the kind of the framework, the life operating system. Talk us through that in terms of, how that can help address some of these issues.
Yeah. So like I said, when I was kind of recovering and I was doing lots of research for myself personally, not for the book at this point, I noticed that things were dropping into 4 main categories or 4 buckets. The first one was in regards to relationships, funnily enough. So there's a lot to do with our relationships that will, either help us get through a tough time, or obviously it can go in the opposite direction as well, right? So kind of relationships was one. Second one was the work that we do. And how we do it, who we do it with, and so on and so on. The third one was just general kind of like personal mastery, as I call it. So it's looking after yourself. It's making sure that you continue to learn and upskill and all that kind of stuff as well. Staying, inquisitive and turned on to the idea of learning new things, putting yourself in new situations, and so on and so on. And then the last one, and this one came to me as a real surprise. And every time I've talked about this, it's always struck a massively loud chord with people. And that is hobbies. I did not see this one coming at all, Matt, but it was really interesting because hobbies and pastimes are incredibly important for our recovery away from work, whether you're a business owner or, like a high-powered executive or even just kind of like a middle-level manager or whatever. Like if you don't have hobbies, if you literally don't have hobbies, that will cause you to not recover properly during the bouts of work and time off. So we did a lot of research on all these things. And ultimately what happens is, and this is where it gets I kind of geek out over this stuff a little bit and get a bit excited about it, but where your personal mastery and your hobbies kind of almost overlap, the time that you spend on yourself and doing the things that you enjoy represents that balance that we want to have between our self-improvement and obviously enjoying ourselves, right? So super important for recovery. Where hobbies and love and relationships kind of overlap and meet up, what's happening here is that memories that are created then reflect the experiences that we've had with the people by obviously pursuing our passions and nurturing those relationships that we care most about. So that's a happiness score factor right there. And then when we get a little bit more kind of tactical, delving into work relationships and the work that we do and who we do it with and why we do it and so on, what happens is it shows that the meaningful work that we do enables our personal freedom to grow, and therefore it strengthens the relationships that we have at work as well. And then finally, and this is where it all kind of meets up in the middle, once you start to get the intersection between personal mastery and impactful work and this kind of, if you imagine a bit of a Venn diagram here, you get all that in there. And what happens is the clients that you end up working with, they reflect then the value and the influence that you generate and you exude by applying, obviously, your expertise in work itself. So once you combine these 4 things, like I was thinking, somebody asked me, why do you call it the Life OS? I'm like, well, if your computer has an operating system, if your phone has an operating system, why don't you have an operating system? Why don't you have an OS? So that's why we called it the Long Haul Leader Life OS. And really, once you combine those things together, things should be a lot better for you.
Yeah, and I think it's just such an important thing, that kind of balance. And I think the hobbies thing driving it is fascinating because I realized that my hobby is podcasting because that was originally what it was. So while I'd sit there and scoff at people who go, my hobby is work, I realized, well, actually mine was as well. So I think that's interesting.
You see, now I've got a friend of mine who also is a very popular podcaster. And he loves podcasting for his work. But then, he was telling me about this maybe a year ago. And I said to him, well, what you want to do is you want to detach podcasting from work. You can still get involved with it from a hobbies perspective, but it needs to be completely unbusiness related. You do it entirely for the love of doing it. Come up with another podcast that's based around something that you really enjoy doing. and inspire other people in that way. And so he did. He started a Lego podcast because he's big into Lego. And it's gone off like it's Lego geeks. He sits and talks for 40 minutes about the latest Lego set and reviews it and what it was like to build and where he's put it on in his house and all these things. I
could think of 10 people already who'd want to listen to that.
Right. There you go. And when I was doing the research for the book, I came across one particular thing that I really needed to kind of get home the fact that high-level executives need hobbies as well to be able to kind of switch off from what they do and not just take their work home every night, right? And so I found out there's this one particular gentleman under the name of David Solomon. And David Solomon is the CEO of Goldman Sachs, right? So big company, okay? Massive company. David Solomon on the weekends is known as DJ D-Sol. And he is one of the most sought after dance and party DJs in America. It's insane. So if the CEO of Goldman Sachs can have a hobby like DJing, there's no reason why you, me, or anyone else can. But here's the big one as well, on a final point on this topic. Hobbies that are classed as creative hobbies, so things like DJing or, building little toys, plastic toys, or painting, or, for example, I'm a bonsai practitioner, right? So anything kind of that creatively stimulates your brain away from work. It's actually been proven, and again, this was another Forbes survey, it's actually been proven that it will boost your overall performance at work by as much as 30% if you engage in those creative hobbies for a minimum of 2 hours a week. It really is. So if you think about it from a logical perspective, you can perform an average of 30% better at work by having a creative hobby on the weekend or in the evenings. Go get a hobby, plain simple. That's the postcard message.
And just before we kind of move on to the next topic, I wanted to kind of just circle back and pick up on the thing that you were talking about in terms of sleep. Because I think also one of the interesting things for me has been to start measuring various aspects, measuring more aspects of my health. And until I started measuring my sleep, I thought that I got great sleep and I was a great sleeper. But
I remember this conversation. Yeah.
It's awful. So I got a kind of a Whoop band, which I'm wearing here to measure it. Other sleep trackers are available. And I just couldn't believe how poor the quality of my sleep was. And it's a bit of a journey to improve that. So there's still lots of improvements to make, but it's definitely getting better. How important is data in all of this in terms of actually really understanding what's going on with your health and various other aspects of your life?
I think different people are going to handle this in different ways. For me, it's become almost like not an obsession, but it's become something that I take very, 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 very seriously. For the longest time, I've been saying the numbers never lie. Look at the numbers. Look at the data. Look at the, why is your website not converting new visitors into paying clients? Well, I haven't got enough website visitors. Well, then the numbers don't lie. You need to drive more traffic to your website, so on and so on and so on, right? Equally, there's no point in wearing a sleep tracking device or a health device, Apple Watch, whatever you're wearing. There's no point in wearing something like that if you're not going to take the data at pretty much at face value as what it is, right? So, I think what it is, the big issue here is that being busy is a bit of a trap. We've been taught to kind of keep our schedules quite busy, not only at work, but also in our private lives as well. But here's the thing. We shouldn't be confusing motion, doing stuff, for momentum, right? And I think that's a really key, important part there, because when I look at the data and I and it takes, a while to wear any of these things until the data kind of like, balances up a little bit and gets to know you and your habits and things like that. But for example, I wear a Whoop as well. And I know that even if I have one glass of wine with dinner, just one glass of wine with dinner, I know that will affect my sleep quality because I've got the data to back it up. It's no longer a coincidence. It's actually data driven. So if I'm out and I decide to have a glass of wine, maybe it's celebration or something like that, then, by all means, enjoy the drink. That's fine. But know that you're probably going to get a lackingly decent amount of sleep, through that evening. Likewise, I also know, and this is different for other people as well, I also know that if I exercise past noon, then that will usually attribute to bringing my recovery score down as well. Whereas if I exercise first thing in the morning, it actually has the direct opposite effect and actually boosts my recovery score. So that, again, no point in looking and wearing something like this and getting the reports and getting the notifications unless you look at it and you say, okay, that makes total sense. That makes total sense. I did something about 6 months ago that has revolutionized my sleep. And it was as simple as buying some nose strips and putting these nose strips on the bridge of my nose. It kind of just open up your airways a little bit more. My level of deep sleep when I wear one of those nose strips is noticeably higher compared to when I don't wear a nose strip. And they're like, I don't know, 10p each or something, the equivalent thereof, or whatever it is. So I now have a recurring subscription on Amazon once a month. I get this little box of nose strips arrive, and I use those because, again, if it helps me get, if I get, say, 7 hours sleep and 3.5, 4 hours of those sleep are decent restorative sleep, I know I'm going to have a much, much better day ahead of me,
One of the key parts of the book comes in the notion of the long haul. And I know that lots of people listening really want a long-term career. They want to have a long-term impact on the business that they're working in the discipline they're working in, all those kind of things. But we live in a very short-term world where it's all about do this today, short-term numbers, short-term budgets, all that kind of thing. News cycles, the craziest things that will happen, which 20 years ago would have dominated the news for a year, but the next day we're on to the next crazy thing. How do you build a long-term impact in the crazy sort of short-termistic world that we seem to live in?
Well, I think the issue is that we've been programmed, whether you're working for a business or a company or whatever, or if you're running your own one, we have been programmed into the ideas that hustle, right, quote unquote, is a really, really good thing. But hustle culture is not good at all. And in fact, actually, the introduction to the book is entitled "Hustle is a Season, Not a Lifestyle." And the general kind of message behind that is that it's okay to hustle, to work hard, to go the extra mile, to put your foot down on the gas or pull back on the throttle a little bit harder than usual for a certain period of time, but it's not sustainable. So the goal shouldn't actually be to hustle harder. It should be to last longer. So the hustle might get you through a big deadline at work or something along those lines, but it's going to be the habits that you incorporate into the way that you do your work and obviously live your life that will help you actually last. So we want to build a career that ultimately doesn't break you bit by bit, slowly but surely over a period of time, but also we want to be having that career building us up bit by bit, right? So short-term wins are really, really good. Don't get me wrong. Like I love those quick wins, as you well know, but it's the long-term impact that kind of quietly kind of whispers and whispers and whispers until it starts roaring. And that for me is the real game that we should all be playing. It's about patience and consistency and showing up even when it's not kind of flashy or sexy. It's about doing the unsexy work when no one else is looking. That enables you to have that compound factor, right? Like bit by bit over a period of time, these little micro moves, as I call them, 1% 1% here, 1% there. And that for me is the best way to build a career or build a business or whatever it is that you're doing for the long haul, rather than just trying to get after those quick wins as and when they're presented to you. It's not about, some people call it the whole kind of get rich quick kind of schemes and things like that. no one ever got rich quick, ever. Like, I don't know anyone who is rich that got rich overnight. I literally know nobody that is financially comfortable because they did one thing and it just kind of blew it up. I know nobody like that. They all did something really well, really consistently for a certain period of time before it really flew.
Yeah, 1,000,000% agree with you. We were talking about smartphones earlier and the way that they changed work in a way that humans still haven't quite adapted to. We've got at least 25 minutes into this podcast without mentioning the word AI, but it's illegal to do.
Congratulations!
I know, I'm really pleased with myself. Actually, but it's illegal to do a business podcast without talking about it. So, just one simple question: AI, friend or foe?
Friends, I think ultimately. I say that with a slight caveat, though. We're still really early on in the development of AI, and I'm no AI expert at all. I do know, however, that companies and individuals who run and manage those companies are in a bit of a tailspin right now as to whether or not they get behind it, they use it, they don't use it, they ignore it, whatever it is. My gut feeling tells me that if you ignore AI, even at this very early infancy stage, you will probably likely do so at your own peril in some way, shape, or form in terms of the development of your career or the scalability of your business or whatever the case may be. Now, like I said, with that caveat, we don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years with this thing. So, I err on the side of caution with everything, but I'm definitely utilizing it rather than ignoring it, put it that way.
Absolutely. And as a kind of a final question, we talk a lot about the future of work. Over my career, I've seen work change a lot, sometimes for the worse, sometimes for the better. But we're still sort of fundamentally in this position where work is burning people out and, companies will talk lovingly about culture and caring for their employees and all that kind of stuff. But this is still happening. What do you hope that the future of work is going to look like?
That's a really good question. My hope is that, the leaders in our corporations not only take care of themselves and get a little selfish about that, because a lot of them don't, quite frankly, but equally that they, one of the KPIs that they look at is how happy somebody is in their work, and it's not just about hitting sales targets or, minimizing churn and turnover of employees or whatever the case may be. It is about happiness. It is about somebody being fulfilled and content doing what they're doing for whoever they're doing it for. And I thought a lot about using the word leader in the title of this book, because when you put the word leader on a book title, it instantly gets categorized as a leadership book everywhere. Ultimately, I did it because I really truly believe that leadership isn't necessarily about being everywhere at all times. It's actually about being where it matters at that particular time. So you don't need to be in every room, in every meeting, on every call. But ultimately, what we should be doing as leaders is to choose the moves that we make in the presence of ourselves. We should be choosing those with intention, not insecurity, if that makes sense. Like I know I've worked with people before in the past who wanted to be in a meeting just in case somebody said something bad about them. Well, holy moly, if you're that insecure, then maybe do stuff that makes sure that people won't speak badly about you when you're not in the room, So I think it is about leading with intention and coming from a place of intention and caring rather than just insecurity. And, all of that stuff drains somebody, slowly but surely. I think if you can be a little bit more positive, a bit more happier about things, everything works out.
Absolutely. And lastly, where can people connect with you? Where can people find the book?
Well, I'm at Chris Ducker on all the socials. I'm on chrisducker.com as well. But if they're interested in the book, prior to September 2, which is the official launch day of the book, if they go to longhaulleader.com and pre-order their copy there, they'll get $600 worth of training bonuses as well. So we've got downloadable stuff and training, video training and all that sort of stuff as well. But ultimately, you can get it in all good bookstores and all good online retailers. Just search for Long Haul Leader.
Chris, thank you very much for talking to me.
Yeah, it's all my pleasure.
My thanks to Chris. Don't forget, if you haven't already, you can quickly and easily benchmark your talent acquisition capability by completing the free Fit for the Future assessment. Just head over to mattalder.me/podcast. It only takes a few minutes and you'll receive valuable insights right away. You can follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can search through all the past episodes at recruitingfuture.com, where you can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter, Recruiting Future Feast, and get the inside track on everything that's coming up on the show. Thanks very much for listening. I'll be back next time, and I hope you'll join me.
This is my show.